Good morning and welcome back to our webinar series. Today we'll be looking at the OnBase 12 version and some of the super force features that have been added to it. There we go. As always, our Naviant Support staff is made up of Chris, Greg, Jen, Josh, and Gentry. And your host today is me, Tiny Jen. I'm all alone. Nobody loves me. But you guys, I know you do. So again, voice is muted for the audience so that you can hear me clearly. There is a chat box available in the webinar screen so that you can type in your comments and questions. And at the end, please do complete the survey at the end of the webinar. We don't often get a lot of comments, but we do really appreciate them and get pretty excited when we get something to take action on. So do please fill them out. Our agenda for this morning, we'll be talking about the statistics of the new release. I'll be highlighting a few new modules and major enhancements. We'll talk about the next training opportunities, and hopefully we'll have some time for question and answer. So, OnBase 12 statistics. As you probably know by now, it was released at the end of June of this year. It included over 3,100 enhancements and 8,100 software changes, which is almost twice the number of enhancements and changes that came out in 11. So huge number of improvements in version 12. So also included in 12 now is support for SQL Server 2012. So if you want to start playing with that, now you can. So they've also added support for Active Directory Federation services, which I'll touch on a little bit later, and native 64-bit Microsoft Office, as well as IE9 and Firefox browser versions 3.6, 4.0, and 10 extended support release. New modules. There are a number, but the three that I'll be touching on today are the Gateway Caching Server, Workflow Studio, and Workview integration for Outlook 2010. Gateway Caching Server. Sounds pretty fancy. It's basically a network component that allows you to manage your file caching geographically. So if you have people in far-flung places in the world, they're able to access their documents through Unity client and the web client without it feeling like they're on the other end of the world. So they do that by caching large files at remote locations. So for example, Gateway Caching Server requests the document. The first time it pulls down that document, it may take a little bit longer because it's grabbing it from the home office, but then it caches it to the local server where that person is, or closer to where that person is. And then subsequent requests will pull from that cached file rather than from the home office. So it does require a separate license. So here's a little diagram that shows you graphically how this works. So, and I also wanted to mention that files that are stored in the cache are encrypted to protect the security of the document. So they can be viewed only in OnBase by users with the right privileges. So even if you hack into the caching server somehow and find out where those cache documents are, you won't be able to open them outside of OnBase. So in this example, we have our home office in Ohio and 3 satellite offices around the world. And the database, the disk groups, and the application server are all in the home office. And then each of the remote locations has a gateway installed. And the gateway communicates with the system in Ohio through the web server. So the remote locations can also have other components like web servers, web clients, Unity clients, and also custom-based Unity API applications as well. So and all of these components communicate with the gateway, which resolves large file requests using that local cache. This is the list of file formats right now that are included in the caching support. So It's basically the file format types that are typically associated with large file sizes. So your Office documents, your PDFs, your rich text, your AV, and your CAD type documents. Workflow Studio. We've touched on it before, but it's worth looking at again because it really is super, super awesome. So it allows you to configure your workflow life cycles in a much easier way. You can also, with Workflow Studio, configure Unity life cycles. And the cool thing about Unity life cycles is that it can route more than just documents. You can route Workview objects, manage folders, and a couple other types of things. The Workflow Doctor now provides you with real-time feedback, so you don't have to stop and go run a Workflow Doctor report to find out what's wrong. It will tell you right away. You can also generate documentation for your life cycles very, very easily. And it is included in the existing Workflow license. So if you have Workflow, you have Workflow Studio in 12. So there's another little piece too. You can create BPN models, which is Business Process Modeling Notation. And when you're licensed for that, it is a separate license, then Workflow Studio allows you to graphically draw a business process, and then the execution language will allow you to execute that process. So those processes and exports are separate and independent from the OnBase Workflow module, but you can use Workflow Studio to build them. All right, so this is your old school configuration window for Workflow, which you've got all your life cycles and your queues and actions and rules on the left, and then on the right you have the detail for whichever setting you're trying to configure. And then down through the drop-down menu, you have access to your Workflow Doctor, your search, and your notifications and user form types of things. So it's all there, but it's not all there at the same time. And so there's some perception that Workflow can be difficult to configure. The neat thing about Workflow Studio is that it acts as more of an assistant to help you make configuration easier and more accurate on the first pass, and helps you also maintain the integrity of your life cycles. And it does this primarily in 3 ways. The new layout, which we should see, there it is. So the new layout makes configuration of workflows much easier. The alerts are in real time, and the documentation really is pretty painless now. So at a glance, you'll know if the logic that you're editing is used in multiple places, if a queue is load balanced, or which platforms are supported by each rule or action you select. And I'll touch on that in a minute too. Let me get a little bit into this. So here's a close-up of the graphical designer, and it includes drag and drop functionality for adding new queues, and provides everything from visual notification to real-time feedback from the integrated Workflow Doctor, which helps you identify configuration errors. So in this example, if you look in the overall view, you can see pretty easily where a document comes into the life cycle, or an item if it's a Unity life cycle, and how it can route. And if you look at the disputed invoices queue in the lower left-hand corner, notice that there are 2 additional icons attached to it. And the one on the left indicates that this is a load balanced queue. The one on the right is an indicator from the Workflow Doctor that something isn't configured correctly. And if I were to roll my mouse over that triangle, it would tell me that I didn't actually assign any load balance members to my load balance queue. So as you know, the help text field on the General tab is very useful for providing mouse over text for your end users in Workflow. By making use of the new Documentation tab in Workflow Studio, you can create 2 types of documentation quickly and very easily. So if you track it as you go in the Documentation tab, then when you're ready, you can print out a set of user documentation which provides lifecycle flow for your end users. And you can also create a set of administrative documentation, which includes all of the back-end setting details that the users really don't care about, but you as an admin do for disaster recovery or just basic complete documentation. And I pulled up a couple of screens to show you an example of what you might see in the documentation. So this one might be more of an end user type, so they get that sort of high-level overview of the flow, and then further down it will get more into the detail of what's going on. So here's a queue level. You can see who has access to it, where the documents are coming from, where they go, any ad hoc tasks that are a part of the process, who has access to them, what they do, which a lot of the textual information in this comes out of that documentation tab. So if you don't fill out the documentation tab, the document that you create from it is not going to be very informative. So you do still have to do a little bit of work, but you don't have to organize it. So it makes it a lot easier. So, and then here's one that's more from the admin side that gives you some information there. All right, rules and actions. They are now grouped by type in Workflow Studio to help you find what you're looking for faster. And also on the right side, you'll see that there are icons next to each one that show you whether the rule or action is supported for use in core or classic mode or both. So if you see that little Unity O, then it's supported in core. The other one is supported in classic. And you can see down at the bottom, our check content type is only supported in classic mode. So really, you have visual notifications everywhere you go. So I would say my top 10 things about it, which no particular order, are you have a separate installer, so you can control who has access to the Workflow Studio. And you don't have to give them access to config in order to give them access to Workflow Studio, so it separates that out. You also have a drag-and-drop graphical designer in the center with those visual notifications that I showed you. You have Workflow Doctor with real-time feedback, which displays down in the bottom panel there. And you can actually filter the messages you see. So if you only want it to show you the messages from the particular life cycle that you're working on, you can tell it to do that, or other filters that you may wish to apply. We've got the rule and action grouping with the classic versus core indicators. We have the documentation tab and the automatic document generation based on the information in those tabs. You also have the ability to connect to multiple repositories, which means you can connect to both your test and your production environments and do your work in one interface. You have check-in, check-out capability as well, which protects you from somebody else making changes to a life cycle while you are working on it. You have the ability to recycle the application pool right from the Workflow Studio, if you so choose. You also have some studio options. Here's just a little screen that shows some of the things that you as a personal user of Workflow Studio can customize what you see and what you don't see and how things are organized. And then there's also, this is a cool one, we have more advanced copy-paste functionality for your rule and action sets. So in the past, when you would copy a rule or an action set from one life cycle to another life cycle, or maybe from one queue to another queue in the same life cycle, they would be linked. And you wouldn't necessarily remember that if you make a change to one, it's also going to affect that same set being used elsewhere. So with this advanced copy-paste, you get notified, right as you're doing it, okay, how do you want to present this? Do you want to keep it linked? Do you want to break the link? Do you want a copy of just the high-level part of the high-level rule or action, or do you want everything that's underneath it as well? So it gives you more options there and helps keep you from accidentally shooting yourself in the foot later. All right, Workview integration for Outlook 2010. So it really helps automate call centers or other processes where email messages are a central vehicle for communication. So it provides you a task pane where Workview filters can show related objects within Microsoft Outlook. You get Workview objects that you can create from your email messages. So you can also view your contextual objects directly from email based on the metadata, and it does require a separate license. So just really quickly, when you're in Outlook, you have that Workview button up there in your OnBase ribbon, and that will give you a contextual pane, which will basically give you a number of options and things that you can do with it. So, and that's the list. I'm not really going to belabor it at this point, but it's cool. All right, sip of tea. Moving on. Major enhancements. There are a lot. I'm just going to talk about a handful of them today. So let's start with advanced capture, which I'm just going to really touch on really briefly because our next webinar is going to focus on it in much greater detail. And advanced capture has been around for some time, but it has, with this version, been given a lot of enhancements to the line item processing, the document identification, pattern matching, and numerous other performance type improvements, these of which I would say are the most notable. So you now have automatic detection of handwriting or machine print. You have conditional zone processing based on other identification zones, which means you can say, if there's something in this area of the page, then go look at this other area of the page for information. Otherwise, don't bother OCRing it. You have continuation strings and end of document detection. You have integrated barcode processing, and you also now have built-in address field parsing and rotated text. So, and like I said, we'll talk about this in another webinar, so I'm just going to move on to the next thing. App Enabler has some enhancements as well. Not too much, I would say, that's changed, well, too many things, I would say, but some of the improvements are pretty good. So it's now, most notably, a native built-in component of Unity Client, which means that you have a single quick once deployment package that you can deploy both Unity and E in the same package. And this also includes AE Live. Note about AE Live is that text-based screens configured do require OCR in order for AE Live to update. Excuse me. So there's your App Enabler configuration area. And you also now have a new Smart Screen, which enables applications written in Silverlight and Windows Presentation Foundation. So you can also use this for IE or Windows-based hosted applications, as you know. And the Smart Screen enhancement was ported back to 11. So if you're on 11 and you want to check it out, maybe we just need a new build, or maybe it's in your build and you didn't know it. So for example, for AE Live, say I'm an AP clerk and I'm working through my invoices in my business application. And AE Live, up in the right-hand corner, will show me that I have all of my related documents without having to go look for them. So if I click on that little icon, shows me all 5 of those documents. And as I work through my invoices, it updates to show me where I'm missing something. So you can see now where my number has reduced to 3, and the little circle around it has turned red, which says something's missing. And now I can see which 2 documents I'm missing. And if I find that I want to open those documents, I can still keep the retrieval dialog open and have instant access to the information that I need at the same time. Foldering has gotten some enhancements as well. So related folders is one. That's pretty cool. They're basically OnBase folders that belong to a specific folder type, and they share one or more common keyword values with the folder that you're viewing. And I'll show you that in a second. And then also we have drag and drop indexing, filters, and folder-based custom queries in the Unity Client Folders interface. And a folder type custom query works basically like other custom queries, except that instead of retrieving documents, they retrieve folders. So here's a screenshot showing related folders. Right now I am in the Records Management Employee Records file cabinet looking at Andrew Lincoln's documentation. And down here is my related folder window. So I have configured this folder, the employee record level folder for each person in the file cabinet, to relate to the HR employee file cabinet employee records at the same at that same level. So it basically gives me access to documents in other places without me having to go crawl through each of the file cabinets individually. So that's kind of nice. The web client has gotten a few enhancements as well, most notably collaboration, digital signatures, and DocPop page linking. Unity Client, on the other hand, has gotten a lot of enhancements, and that, of course, is because Highland is moving towards Unity because it's really cool. So just a note on a couple of these things. Autofill keyword sets, that enhancement now supports import and maintenance and reverse autofill keyword sets as well. And document imaging now includes support for COFAX, ISIS, barcode processing, batch-level document corrections, document separation, page rotation, deletion, and reordering. So a lot going on there. So a lot more functionality in the scanning and indexing world in the Unity client. Here's our personal page, if you haven't seen it yet. Just a quick screen to show you, those of you who haven't seen it, which allows you to add tiles to your screen. Each user can do this for themselves. So you can add shortcut tiles to create a customized OnBase dashboard of information for yourself. So in this case, I've got a workflow queue shortcut on there, so I can see at a glance from looking at my dashboard that there are documents in that queue that I might want to work on, and I don't have to go to Workflow to find that out. And in fact, I don't even have to go to Workflow to start the work. I can just click directly on the link that's on my dashboard and start working on that document immediately. So I've also got links on here for folders, e-forms, internal OnBase email. There's a query on here. There's a DKT, document knowledge transfer, and full text search as well. So all kinds of different things that you can put on there at your own personal preference, and you can reorder them and move them around how you like. Some other new options. Users can configure things a lot more for themselves now. Ones of note, I would say, are you have the ability to disable animations. So if your particular laptop doesn't really have a lot of juice, you can turn off some of that functionality to help keep your speed as effective as possible, or maybe you just don't like them. You can set the notes panel to appear automatically. You can tell it to open Office documents with OBA instead of other methods. And you can also set it to open documents immediately after upload. So there's a lot of different things that you can, as a user, configure to make your own personal work experience as effective as possible. On the document side, we can now add and remove and reorder pages in image documents a lot easier. So if I have two documents up side by side in edit mode, and I want to move a page from one document to the other, I can do that very easily by basically just dragging it across. document separation. From editor or reindex, you can choose split to split your documents, which allows you to very quickly and easily create new documents. So here I've got a split here, here's another split here from existing ones. And oops, there we go. And the reindexing from here is much easier too, because now you have 3 different documents that you're basically looking at simultaneously, and you can proceed down through them and change how you index. So maybe you're splitting a document and reindexing it to a different document type. So, and you can copy pages between documents easier as well. So this does require an advanced document splitter user group privilege in order to do it, but it's pretty useful, I would say. So you can also adjust your thumbnail size and your viewing area. So if you don't like how big the thumbnails are, you can make them bigger, or you can make them a lot bigger, and you can make your thumbnails pretty huge, too, or rather your viewing area for your thumbnail larger as well. Batch scanning is now supported in version 12 via Kofax, as I said before. This is very nice. So you can do some significant scanning now in the Unity client. And as you see here, the layout is very similar to what you're used to in the classic thick client, where you have your scan formats on your left and your scan queues on your right, and you go in and you do your scanning business. You can index your batches from the Unity client now. Now, batch commits are still performed from either the scheduled commit or manually via the thick client, so you can't commit from the Unity client, but you can do all of your indexing. So, and if you can see my mouse here, but these 5 icons that roll across the center here, you've got your ad hoc automatic indexing, your awaiting index, your index in progress, awaiting commit, and committed areas. So you can switch back and forth between those 2 views even if you can't commit the batches from here. All right, Unity Forms. We talked about this at the user conference, but not everybody made it to the user conference. And it's really gained a lot of functionality in 12, so it's worth touching on again. And you can see there's a lot going on here now. You can do calculated fields and custom actions and cascading data sets and all kinds of cool stuff. And you also have Theme Designer, which allows you to set your color scheme for your form, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. You don't have to, oh, did I make this button this color, and oh, I forgot to do that button. And so it's really easy to set a theme, which you can apply to a form template, and you can take it to other form templates as well. So if you want to keep all of your forms consistently in line, it's very easy to do. So here's a screen of the designer. And you can, you know what, I'm just going to show it to you. I think that'll be a little bit more effective since I didn't get to demo it. There we go. Let's switch over to designer mode. And I'm going to open my Supers application. So a lot of changes were made to the designer between 11 and 12 to make the template building a more positive experience. So you have drag and drop controls, and you have an enhanced visual design, and the toolbox is easier to use. So a lot of things that are really easy. So over here on the left in your toolbox, we've got all our controls where you can drag in a text box. I'll just click on it. There we go. So I've got a text box that showed up right in that orange area that appeared. I'll close that out. So you can drag in different things that are not tied to keywords. If you have keywords tied to the document type, you can add those as well, which I've already added that one to the top here. So, and there are other types of properties that you can add as well. And once you've added, down here in the lower point pane, you have your properties for that particular element. So you can determine, and this is a really nice thing that they've added with the later builds, you can actually specify the width of your field now. So that's particularly useful for spreadsheet type of, I should open another form so I can show you that. I wonder if a purchase requisition might have it. Nope. All right, well, let's go back to our slide because I know there's one on there. This one. All right, let me just flip through here. We've got our autofill keyword sets that still apply, field masking and validation, which will basically throw an error to the user if they fill out the field incorrectly, and it won't allow them to submit it until they do it the right way. You've got your calendar integrated now, so you no longer have to custom code a calendar. It's built-in functionality. So if you have a date formatted field type, calendar will be available. Pretty cool. Okay, so here's our, collapsible selections, right? So if you have a long form, you can collapse up sections so that you don't have to look at things that you're not caring about. And then we've got our tabs. Where did my, there it is, equipment list. Repeating sections. Okay. So what that means is you basically configure one row in the designer mode on your end, and users will add a line item as they need to in their form, and that's a repeating section. And in the earlier iterations of this, the field widths were determined by how many fields you had in a row. Now you can actually determine, if I have a quantity field in here, I don't necessarily want it being that wide. Maybe I only want it 5 characters wide or 2. You can set that, and then that gives you more real estate that you can devote to longer things like maybe a description field. So let me go back to the demo. Nope, that's not it. Where'd it go? There it is. All right, just to point out a couple more things, and I'm going to go back to my other form because it has more than one tab. Plus, I like it. It's pretty. All right. So on the right side, you see there are 2 pages. And in Designer, a tab shows up at a page. So when you're in Designer mode, you're looking at one tab at a time. And then when you go into the user mode, just retrieve one. HR. All right, there you can see we've got both tabs. Back in Designer, let's see, a couple things I want to point out in here. Yes, custom actions. Custom actions are very cool. They allow you to basically provide if-then clauses. So, for example, on my page 2, I have set up some custom actions so that some of these fields don't appear unless the box that is tied to it is checked. So for this sidekick one, I have it set, if the sidekick box is checked, if it's not empty, then make the text box visible. So, and there's a lot of different options. So you can say whether an expression evaluates to be true or false, whether a field is empty or not, whether a form is or is not in a particular queue, and other types of things. You can, oh, this is a good one too. User is or is not in group. So that allows you also to secure your visibility. You can do it through here, or you can also do it through, there's another area that I'll show you in a minute where you can do your visibility controls. And although here, the benefit of doing it here is that the if clause is if the user is or is not in the group. And then the corresponding, actually, let me just add this so that I can, oh, no, I don't have to. I can just do the action down here. Call the custom action. Then you can say, where'd it go? Change element editability. So you can set fields that are visible to everyone, but only certain people are allowed to edit those fields. So you can control, obviously, visibility here as well, and a bunch of other things like expanding and collapsing, setting the field focus, setting a value, making things required. That's another good one, too. If they fill out one field, then this other field has to be filled out, but not unless they fill out the first. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do in here without having to script it. It's all built-in functionality, which is pretty groovy. So the other security level that I wanted to point out is down here, is this user group security level in the lower left-hand corner. And the way I've configured this form, I've set it so that the admin tab is only visible to managers and HR users groups. So if you're just a regular person applying to the Evil League of Evil or the Justice League or what have you, you're not going to see the admin area. So in Test Drive, I can actually show you that in action. So right now, I've come in here as a user. So I see the applicant field, but I don't see anything else. And if I were to change to be an HR user and refresh that, now I see the second tab. And there it is. And you can see that those text fields aren't showing up because I hadn't clicked the corresponding requirement. Now I want to show you a quick calculation. So let's say I'm 105. And I'm applying to the Justice League. And I have assisted 4 elders. I've made 2 successful rescues, and I have foiled 42 evil plans, because I'm awesome that way. So if I switch over to the other tab, oh, I didn't submit it. That's right. I have my rule set to do this on submit. I wonder if it'll... See, there you go. Here's another thing. It's telling me I can't submit the form because I did not fill out a required field. So I go back over here, and it shows me which fields I have not filled out. So cool stuff. All right, let's get back to the slides. Flip all past all this. Still cool. There's our custom actions. So these are the options for do this when these conditions are true or not true or what have you. Talked about that. Our user group level security. This is the test drive. We'll pass this. Form tab and history. This one's kind of cool. So this allows you to see the changes that have happened in the fields on the form over time. So that's just kind of a neat little thing. All right, network security enhancements. This is actually some pretty groovy stuff. So support for Active Directory Federation services. And ADFS is it's a software component developed by Microsoft to provide you with the ability to do single sign-on access to things that are across organizational boundaries. So it's kind of an extension of Active Directory on a wider scale. So maybe you want to use it to control access to extranets for your partners, or things that businesses that aren't under your control, but you want to have some sort of connectivity to it. Also, Active Directory is no longer tied to OnBase only through common naming conventions. So on the Active Directory side, you have more mapping options in a multi-domain environment. You have many-to-many mappings between OnBase and AD groups, and it matches by SID now to remove possible problems matching things, and support for inclusions as well, or exclusions rather. So what I mean by no longer tying to common naming conventions is that in the old way, when you wanted to have Active Directory integration, you would have to make sure that your user group in the OnBase world and your user group in the Active Directory world are named identically and case sensitive, and it has to be exact in order for it to work. OnBase is a lot more flexible now, and it's able to handle it a lot more gracefully. So let me just show you quickly how it works after I take a sip of tea. All right. So as with other options, setting Active Directory authentication is a one-way procedure. So if you're not sure which method you want to use, I recommend trying it out in your test environment, and you can easily restore it from backup then to go back if you don't like the outcome. So once you've decided you want to do Active Directory, if you click on the Settings button, that'll bring you to the group mapping window where you can map your user groups or even individual users from Active Directory to OnBase user groups with a drag and drop. So here the screenshot shows one domain that has been added to the list of available domains for OnBase to pull from. If you have multiple domains, you can simply add those to the list. So you can have multiple things that are available to you to manage your security. User privileges should be managed primarily through the use of user group mappings. They're inclusive. But if you have to specifically prevent a Windows group or a user from being associated with a particular OnBase group, then you can map it to the exclusions on the OnBase side. So in adding a user to or a group to exclusion is basically the same as a Windows deny permission, but it's local to that group's scope of access. So let me just flip this really quickly so you can see where I've added one user from Active Directory to the manager group from OnBase, and the domain admins group from Active Directory to the administrator group in OnBase. So just touching back on the exclusions really quickly, if you have a user that is a member of both the users group and the process config group, and both groups have indexing rights, then the user retains the indexing rights in OnBase if they are excluded from the user group but are still a member of the other group. So it is that exclusion is only local to that scope. So if you want to prevent a user, an Active Directory user, or a member of an Active Directory group from logging into OnBase altogether, then you use the exclusions node at the bottom of the pane there. So there's also in the lower left-hand corner, and I didn't get a screenshot of this, but there's an evaluation results window, and that allows you to basically evaluate the results of an authentication attempt in OnBase for an Active Directory user or group. So The results will show you information on the ability of OnBase to resolve that user or group in Active Directory, so whether or not it was able to make that link properly. Whether it could bind to the domain, group, or user object, and then the result of the user or group record in OnBase. So kind of a useful tool for troubleshooting, I think. Moving on, workflow enhancements. So there's a few here as well, just in general for workflow. So you've got your enhancements to optimize the interaction between the import and the core. And there's also now support for routing objects that are not documents in the Unity lifecycles in workflow, and support for document ownership in Unity lifecycles. And document ownership allows you to have a document returned to the person who first worked with it. So that allows you to reduce it can replace load balancing deployments, so you don't have to fiddle with that so much. You can still use it, and in fact, when you use ownership and load balancing at the same time, then the document that is owned as it's routing through can only be viewed by the owner within workflow once it's been claimed, because ownership takes precedence over load balancing. So an example of when this might be useful is, say you have a group of underwriters, and claims are load balanced to different tiers of underwriting groups based on the claim value. So after the claim is load balanced to a different group of underwriters, a single underwriter within that group will own that document and work on it. And when that document is now owned by that underwriter, only that underwriter works on the claim as it passes through that life cycle. Now there's also something called coverage, which is very useful for, say, you have that underwriter has gotten sick or they've gone on vacation and they still own documents in the life cycle. Oops, nobody else can see it, right? Well, coverage allows you to get past that. So you can configure coverage so that a user who is covering for another user will have access to the items that the first one owns. So I hope that makes sense. All right, Unity client workflow enhancements. On the client side, so you now have support for dockable windows. So you can move things around, make it easier. You can assign custom layouts to your OnBase user groups. The graphical view in general has improved, and they've also added functionality for portfolio relationships. And a portfolio relation allows you to specify how documents relate to other documents, also Workview objects or entity items. You can specify Workview objects relating to other Workview objects or documents, or entity items relating to documents or Workview objects. So it's sort of a lot of relating going on there. Okay, we're almost through. So current versions as of yesterday. The thick client build is now on 12.01.571. The core is on 12.01.101. And if you're on 12 and you're not on SP1, I highly recommend you get on it. Kofax capture is on 10.0. VRS current version is the elite package, and Teleforms is on 10.6. Our online resources. The blog, if you didn't know it already, has moved. We did put a redirect in to make it seamless for people, but there is a new URL, so that's the new direct one. There's also the Highland community, which has a lot of useful information as well. Lots to see there, a lot of good information. All right. Our next webinar, as I said earlier, will focus on advanced capture, and there's some really, really cool stuff in it, so I do recommend that you take the time to attend that. We don't have a whole lot more coming up in the next couple months for events, per se, but if you want some additional self-directed training, you might also be interested in Highland's premium subscription service, which has a ton of webinars on a whole wide range of topics, and I've found some actually really good tidbits in there. So that's worth checking out if you haven't seen it. All right. If you have any questions or request for additional information, please, by all means, contact us. That is why we are here. There's our number or our email for our support box, and there's also the live chat available. I actually have a couple minutes left, so if there are any questions for those of you on the webinar, please feel free to type them in, and I will attempt to answer them for you. Wow, I made it. I can't believe I talked for 50 minutes all by myself. And I didn't lose my voice, which I was actually concerned about. It was a little froggy last night. All right. Waiting a minute to see if any questions come in. I've lost my question screen. Ah, there it is. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions, so either that means I did an awesome job and I answered everything right in the webinar, or you had no idea what I was talking about. Hopefully the former. All right. So thank you very much for attending this morning's webinar and being patient with me. And as always, contact us if you have any questions, if you need any for information, or if you have any suggestions for things that you would like to learn about for webinar or hosted training, any of that stuff. Please, please do let us know. And again, don't forget to fill out the survey at the end, because we really like hearing from our customers and knowing what is of use to you, because we want to be helpful. So that is all. Have a wonderful day, and we will talk to you next time.